Hey everyone, Post Editing Chris here, and I just wanted to add this part in before I get into the actual review. Steel Ball Run, this review series, is actually going to be a 3-parter so far because this first part was originally just going to be a 1-hour long video, and I figured that was too long, so I split it up between my generalization of going through everything with the characters, the plot, some of the mysteries and setup as part 1, and part 2 is going to be me going over basically the progression of the story with each of the different stand battles and character interactions, building up to a whole part 2 and ending off with how it's supposed to be. Just wanted to avoid any confusion because, again, I didn't expect it to be that long when I first started recording, but things happen and I figured it'd be easier for you guys if they were just split up into multiple different videos. I am going to have a part 3 out to finish off the final couple of chapters of Steel Ball Run. I'm going to say this in part 2 as well, but it's going to be a bit simpler than parts 1 and 2, as I'm basically just going to be going through the story as is, and it's going to be a bit more generalized. But yeah, I'm going to get back to the video now. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my JoJo Steel Ball Run review. Part 2 is going to be up either in the next few days or a week after this one comes up, and part 3 will be out a week or so after that one. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 7 Steel Ball Run is honestly one of the best manga I have read in the last year. I am not caught up to it, and this is going to be a 2-parter where I go over the basics of what we have for the setup of Steel Ball Run, and then I will just go through each and every interaction with some of the characters in terms of the story progression leading up to where I'm leaving off. But I will tell you, I am a big fan of JoJo's, and I do want to cover Part 7 and Part 8 in their own individual multi-parted videos. Part 7 I split in half, with me covering 50 chapters in this one video, and the next 45, which cover the second half of Steel Ball Run, will be in another part. And all I can tell you from what I read so far, it has been a really great journey so far, and keeps showing me why JoJo's is one of my favorite series of all time, and I just cannot wait to see more. But if you enjoy the JoJo's content on this channel, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos, and it'll show that you guys enjoy the JoJo's on the channel. I do plan to make more JoJo's content outside of these basic reviews of me going through Part 7 and 8, as Part 9 is coming out, and I do want to start covering it. So I do want to make some JoJo's content here and there, so I really hope you guys stick with me with this. I am very excited to jump in to Steel Ball Run. So right away, I want to get into the premise of Steel Ball Run, which every JoJo's has a different premise or genre to differentiate itself from the other, so Araki can be more creative and try something new. In this one, we go all the way back to the 1890s. 1890 to be specific, where we have the setting in the Wild West, in a horse race across the country, starting in California and ending in New York. Which is an interesting concept in and of itself, as it takes basically a road trip aspect with developments going on in between, with chaos coming from every individual direction. A race is an interesting way to go about telling the story, as I honestly did not believe this to be very interesting with how we get into the stand battles later down the road and how the plot gets progressed. But with how Araki does it, I'm honestly very excited, because when it comes to the horse racing aspect, it adds for a lot of 2-page spreads, and something I didn't really realize is how much JoJo's does do 2-page spreads a lot, and the way Araki sets out the panels and even draws the action shown is honestly really incredible, especially when it comes to the horse racing aspects to it, because I get engrossed in a manga where a lot of the action happens on horseback. I did not expect to get engrossed in a horse race in a manga, yet here I am. And it's only elevated by the different character interactions, the story that goes along with it, as something that I have to say, it reminds me of Stardust Crusaders, due to the fact that it was really going from one place to another in a long journey, encountering different stand users along the way. It was an episodic format until we got actual story progression in the second half when we finally make it to Egypt. In this one, we know our clear end goal, but the story progresses through each and every individual stage of the race, with every character we meet, and certain plot points and mysteries being unraveled as we go along. And so far, not everything has been revealed, and there's still some mystery to it, which is something that I really like about JoJo's as a whole, which is something that has been there since Part 4. Primarily in Part 4, 5, and 6, as there's always been a type of mystery aspect when it comes to either who's an enemy stand user, what's their ability going to be, how are we going to meet the next stand user, how are we going to interact with them. But here, having it under the pretense of a long distance race across the country, you will interact with other characters as quickly and as often as you possibly can. And that's something I honestly find genius. As every leg of the race, you get actual progression. We'll see a map, we'll see how each stage of the race progresses, because there is stopping points for the race to our placements, and a lot of the characters have their own reasons for entering the race, especially our main characters, who I will get into in a minute. And with each individual stages, primarily from stage 2 onwards, there are moments where anything goes. So any individual stand users that we encounter along the way, who are all basically racers in this race, will and can be encountered on depending on what routes you take or what decisions you make as you are on your horse trying to get to the goal. Whether you take a shortcut, whether you take the long way around, or just follow the base route that is given to you by the tournament organizers. And that leads into interesting stuff going on, because there are times where you can pass through a city during the middle of a race as a long way around. You go through places and areas where you're not even supposed to, but could come out in first place anyway. There's even strategies in terms of stuff like the habits of a horse, how a horse runs, and just a lot I can get into, which I cannot, but Araki goes into a lot of detail that honestly grabs your interest. And he's not afraid of showing the brutality of being on horseback at high speeds in a long distance race. If you are not careful, if you don't manage your horse properly, you could get seriously injured yourself and your horse, or potentially even die. And this is in the 1890s. There wasn't the vast amount of medicine that we had, and it was still the early stages of the US and everything, with governments coming together. And this is an alternate universe of JoJos, which I didn't get into, but this is a different timeline of JoJos, a full reset, which, while is a bit of a bummer, given part 6 as a conclusion, it makes sense, and I'm okay with that, because we don't need any of the prior JoJo parts to know what's going on in this. Hell, most JoJo parts are self-contained stories that have some influence from the previous, but not too much. But this, Araki has a full clean slate and can start a new world and story from scratch, which I find honestly a lot of fun. Because seeing our new JoJo, seeing our new main cast that we're interacting with, as well as how these stands work, is honestly a whole lot of fun to go in through. And that's honestly what I can talk to you about part 7. It's a lot of fun. Despite JoJo's becoming more of a seinen series, showing a bit more of the adult subject matter and stuff like that, but it's not as that different from regular JoJo's. It can be a bit more brutal, but it still has that same JoJo's charm that you just get engrossed with every new chapter, with every new interaction, and you just can't wait to see what is going to happen next, because the mystery and what's happening keeps you invested, not to mention the characters. Because even the one-off character seemingly that we get from these different stand users honestly really bring us home to something amazing, which really helps with the race aspect, because you get to interact with different characters throughout each stage of the race. Because if you're in an actual cross-country race, you will come across a multitude of different people, whether they be in a city, whether they be a part of the race or not. The side tracks, the misdirects, there's a lot of stuff that could happen going cross country, and a lot of it can be done in the series through stand users or outside interference. But yeah, the racing aspect is honestly something that I've come to really enjoy from part 7. It is something very unique and shows that this story progresses with each individual chapter, and we do get to see some actual progression every single time, and some more of the overarching mystery of this series comes to light every few chapters. And that's something I really do like. Next up, let's talk about the characters. Johnny Joestar, or Jonathan Joestar, and Gyro Zeppeli. The main pair of the series is something I've grown to love. These two have really become fast friends in this entire part, and it's just fun seeing the different interactions, either in battle or just when they're goofing off, preparing food, or just talking about stuff. One of my favorite running gags so far is Gyro coming up with some weird or dumb joke, or even a song at times, and presenting it to Johnny, and Johnny thinks about it for a second and says, "That's actually pretty good." No, that's genius, as it is not even a funny joke to me, or even a catchy song, yet the two of them act like such lovable idiots that you just laugh at their whole interactions, and it's just a hell of a lot of fun. Granted, these two are incredibly intelligent characters, they just can't make jokes for shit half the time, which is honestly a really good running gag. Especially since part 7 Honestly, a lot of people have said this, and I'm more inclined to agree with every few chapters, but Gyro Zeppeli really feels like the main character of the series. We get introduced to him first. He's basically our main point of view character for the opening 10 chapters, along with us seeing more of him and his backstory explored the most between him and Johnny. Now, Johnny does get development. He is the JoJo of this part, and he has a really good backstory, same with Gyro, and both broken individuals in this race for their own individual reasons. Gyro for wanting to stop a child from being executed and needs to win the prize money and to win it for his country in order to get an amnesty passed to get the kid, unable to be executed, and Johnny entering for selfish goat at first. Still kind of selfish, but he, after interacting with Gyro, being intrigued by him, he feels like the power that Gyro showed, the power of spin, can make him walk again. Which is an interesting change for our JoJo. This JoJo is a paraplegic. He cannot walk. He lost the use of his legs, and now he's in a wheelchair. He doesn't really use a wheelchair for the most part. He's always on horseback or he's on the ground. The thing I like is that it doesn't stop him from acting. When he needs to act, he will act. He has the determination and stubbornness of any JoJo we have seen thus far. A joestar through and through for Johnny, but he is more in the moral gray area, similar to, let's say, Giorno from Part 5, as he does end up killing characters, and this is the Wild West for the most part for the early portions of the race, so I'm just going to go with Wild West. He does kill people, he does have his own selfish motives for the most part, and even some moments that show that he's not the most morally just character in this whole series. But it makes him intriguing, it makes him three-dimensional. He has his own selfish goals, but he likes hanging out with Zeppeli. He will help people if he needs to. He'll have a sense of reason to him, but he can also be very selfish at times as well, which I kind of like. It makes a JoJo that isn't incredibly just righteous all the time, which is honestly kind of fun. And Gyro's awesome. He is a badass through and through, and he is probably a very smart character, which honestly, any JoJo character is pretty damn smart, especially with how he utilizes this new power called Spin. This is not a stand ability, though I do have to say, I thought he had a stand at first. And Spin, I think, is just this universe's replacement for Hamon, which is honestly really nice, because not only do we get stands in this part, we also have this power of Spin. And the budding relationship of these two characters starts off with Johnny wanting to know about Spin, thinking that it'll make him walk again. And after the first stage, Gyro takes Johnny on, and they end up going along this whole trip together, becoming partners in crime, basically. And it's very wholesome with their just baseline. Like I said, when it comes to like their baseline interactions, it's just very wholesome. It's like going on a trip with the boys. That's how it feels like when it comes to these two characters, and they play off each other very well. They trust each other within the first interaction with stand users, and the development between these two ends up being really awesome. To go a bit more in depth, let's start with Johnny, our JoJo. He is a jockey. He is a genius jockey from when he was a young child, and ended up competing in a multitude of different events to have his name plastered across the newspapers and getting fame and recognition. However, tragedy strikes one day when he lets that fame go to his head, and he is shot in the back by someone. He gets evicted from a line so he can cut up in front. Wrong place, wrong time. When he didn't want to do anything in that instance to begin with, if he just walked away or got on the back of the line, he would have been fine. He wouldn't even be part of this race. But it just goes to show that life is just unfair at times. One bad decision could screw you over in the end. And it makes matters worse when we dive more into his personal life, where his father didn't really treat him all that greatly. He had a really shitty dad, if I'm being honest, and it only made things worse when his older brother passed away in a racing accident. Johnny, over the years, wanted to basically be the son that his father wanted. He wanted his father's approval, even becoming a really good jockey. All coming ahead before his next race, where him and his father are in his brother's old room, and Johnny wants to borrow one of his brother's boots. His father does not want. And in the ensuing argument of the two fighting over the boot, Johnny pushes his father into a mirror, having his neck get cut up by the glass, and Johnny's shocked by what happened, trying to ask if his father's alright, but the only interaction is his father basically crying out to God, saying that he took the wrong son, breaking Johnny's heart, putting him on the path to where he is today, getting engrossed in his fame as a jockey, basically separating himself from his whole family and leading him down the path that is today. And that's a pretty tragic backstory, if I'm being honest. I know I'm skipping over a lot of nuances, but again, I don't want to make this video like over an hour long. And now we go into Gyro, who was a relatively normal character. His father is a doctor for the common people of Italy, and the spin power is something that has been in their family for generations. Until one day, when Gyro gets old enough, he learns of the true legacy of the Zeppeli family, to be executioners for their state, for their country, where they use the power of spin to loosen the nerves to make it so the prisoners who are being executed die without any pain, without any resistance. And Gyro eventually, slowly, becomes an executioner, though he isn't as morally gray as his father, and he tends to compromise. Gyro is still a kind-hearted person with his own sense of morals, and it is to be tested one day when, like I mentioned, a child who was falsely accused of being part of a coup d'etat just because he worked at a shoe-shining place where the owner was holding secret meetings. He was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and he was arrested and was going to be executed. And Gyro stepped up to it and asked if this whole thing could be appealed, because a child is most likely not a part of it. A child should not be murdered and killed for the mistakes of someone else without knowing what's going on. Until one day, he is approached by one of the members of the state, basically telling Gyro to enter the Steel Ball Run if he wants to get an amnesty so that the child can be let free. And Gyro agrees. Which, adding into the overarching story with Gyro's development in learning to trust more people and going across country with Johnny to find out the mysteries of this race, we end up learning that the Steel Ball Run race is a cover for something else. The organizers of this race are looking for something along the lines of this whole cross-country race. And other countries around the world, primarily Italy right now, and others are looking for something in this race. And over the course of this whole arc, we begin to learn alongside Johnny and Gyro, wondering what's going on, what is this, and how can we stop this from happening. All the while, they still want to make it to the end of the race, that being Gyro's main goal, and Johnny being more on the side of accompanying Gyro, so one, he can learn to walk again, so he can use the power of spin, and also figure out this underlying mystery that they keep finding themselves in with all these different encounters with stand users and mysterious individuals. And Gyro slowly, begrudgingly agrees to this and ends up becoming curious himself, as he is also a target of these mysterious individuals as they cross the race. The other characters of Steel Ball Run are honestly really cool. I can't name all of them right now because I'm going to be going into them a bit as we go along. But I have to say, really a nice character work for the main cast that we've been introduced to. And so far, the main villain that I'll talk about later has been really, really interesting. Something completely I did not expect, but something I'm very happy with. The mystery of Steel Ball Run. Let's get into the mystery real quick, because that is something that we've been wondering for a long time. But honestly, Araki basically told it to us as the mystery was showing itself to us. What do I mean by this? Well, we get at the beginning of one chapter talking about the death of Jesus Christ and how St. Peter basically took his body and hid it somewhere after death. And there is a map detailing where to find it, but it is nowhere to be seen on the continent that they were originating from. And it isn't until the Americas were discovered that it was realized that the map was talking about North America. How he made it there is beyond me and is yet to be explained. But it's very clear that the motive for the organization of this race is to find the body of Jesus Christ, which is an interesting idea for an arc, I have to be honest. Kind of a Da Vinci Code type deal here, with the only difference being that the hidden truth that is trying to be discovered by the US government, the president himself, and even other countries, is the location of the body of Christ. Araki does a lot of religious symbolism in JoJo's from what I've noticed over the years, but this is on the nose and a very interesting direction to take the story, because I did not expect that a cross-country race with ulterior motives ends up coming down to the search for the missing for all the different pieces of a corpse that when put together will be revealed that they are that it is the actual body of Christ from over 2,000 years ago, or in that instance roughly 1900 years ago in the story of JoJo's. I did not expect that. I think that was one of the wildest left turns in JoJo's, and that's saying a lot because JoJo's did a full universal reset in part 6. But I'm not mad about it. I'm not really... I feel a bit indifferent towards it. I'm more intrigued by this decision of Araki because this is something that I was not expecting for this race, like I just mentioned. And I gotta be honest, I'm curious to see where this goes along. Because not only does this add an overarching mystery for the characters who don't know the identity of the corpse that they're looking for, because it is a MacGuffin race. Every individual stage, there will be a different part of the corpse somewhere in this racetrack. And Jaro and Johnny end up finding the first one that we, the audience, end up discovering, which is the right arm. Later on the road, we find the eyes, then we find the left arm, then the ears. We're on our way to get the legs at this point, and the heart is already in possession of the main villain of the arc. Which, again, I'll get into in 1 second, because that was an interesting reveal of who the main villain is going to be for this arc. But the other thing that makes things interesting for this whole fetch quest type deal, and if I'm being honest, Araki didn't really do the best job of foreshadowing it, because literally us, the audience, put 2 and 2 together the second we got the reveal of the map, the exposition of it, and actually seeing what's going on, even though he keeps doing very big teases of the identity of who it is. But it's not frustrating due to the fact that the characters that we're following are trying to figure this out as well. With Jaro having it in his mind that he has an idea of the identity, but he doesn't want to say it because it just sounds impossible. And yeah, it sounds impossible. But yeah, it's an interesting direction to go with the overarching narrative of the story and overarching goal, tying it along with why the race is happening in the first place. So I'm honestly very curious to see where it goes from here. Moving on, let's talk about the origin of stands in this universe, because there are 2 ways as of right now to obtain a stand in Steel Ball Run in this new JoJo's universe, one of which is to be in a specific area that is called a Devil's Palm, an area that appears randomly throughout the desert or in different areas where the land shifts around seemingly as if it was alive, as well as stating that it is also from a meteor that crashed on Earth centuries ago, creating the landscape that it is today, and even the lore of the Native Americans in this universe stating that this area should not be entered by anybody else they be cursed, ends up adding into an extra layer of intrigue of what is the Devil's Palm, and we do get an idea of what the Devil's Palm is as we continue to go along. But basically, if you enter this area unbeknownst, because these areas can pop up anywhere, if you go in there and you survive, most likely through a near-death experience from all the previous stand users that we've seen, if you survive a near-death experience in that area, you will awaken a stand, which is really cool because in the previous part, the only ways for you to get a stand were if you were born with it or someone in your family awaken theirs and then use yours to get awakened from it, or you get pierced with the stand arrow, thus awakening your stand. And in that aspect, you have to actually survive getting stabbed with the arrow in order to get the stand, or get pricked by it in Jolene and some other characters' cases. I guess it depends on the arrow. But in this, coming in this one particular area and surviving, you will most likely awaken a stand, which is a cool concept in and of itself. But from what I'm seeing, since there is a part 8, and I don't think we're going to go with the Devil's Palm, and the next option for how to get a stand in this universe is going to continue, chances are we are going to get characters that are just born with stands later down the ride, or something else is going to help with the awakening of stands. But the second way to awaken a stand is by coming in contact with one of the body parts of Jesus Christ, which is another interesting aspect to go into the story, if I'm being honest. I don't know how I feel about it all in all, because when you come in contact with a part of the body, it will be assimilated into yours. It will be hidden in your body, and it will become a part of you. And once you have one of the body parts assimilated into you, you will awaken your stand. You will awaken your stand power, and that is a really cool concept in and of itself. But what adds a greater layer of risk is that each of these parts are drawn to each other. When you have one part, let's say you have the arm and you're near the other body part, it will be drawn to it and it'll assimilate within you, or it'll draw it out from someone else who has a body part as well. If they're from what I can tell, if they're unconscious, they won't be able to fight back. But the thing that also makes this an extra layer of interesting is that those who have a stand awakened from this method could potentially lose their stand, as once that part is removed from the body, it seems that their power will disappear. As we see later down the road with Gyro, as he gives the part that he eventually gains to another character, and he even states, "I'll lose my ability, but here you go." And something similar happens with Johnny, but only a part of what he had of the body part that he obtained was taken, with only a bit left, so that he could still have the stand power to defend himself. Either way, this is an interesting aspect to go for when it comes to the origin of stands in JoJo's, and I'm honestly very here for it. I love it. It's a really cool idea, and it does add a bit of intrigue and strategy to stand battles in the future, and I honestly really like it. It's really cool. Lastly, really quick, I want to talk about the main villain that's being set up for this arc, who is Funny Valentine, who is the President of the United States in this AU version of JoJo's. That was something right out of left field. I did not expect Araki to make the President the main villain of this part. But hey, things happen, and this is an interesting way to go about it, and it makes sense if this cross-country race ends up becoming a global thing, and there is a map to find basically the key to eternal power from what it takes, from what Araki's building it up to, I guess. It makes sense that the biggest backer would probably be the president themselves to try and get all this power for himself. From what I can tell, is probably for the sake of the country. And doesn't want any other nation to get it. We haven't seen too much of Valentine in this whole arc so far, but he's being built up to be a dangerous individual. He's cunning, he's conniving, he has his own close group of subordinates that he trusts with this whole gathering of the parts, and he's honestly a very strategic person, and I'm interested to see when we get more depth into him. But the thing that I find the best in part 7 compared to all previous parts is that we get introduced to him fairly early on in the story, within the first like 20 to 30 chapters in that marker, and we get a lot of the exposition and reveals from him. What the race is truly about, what he's planning, not fully though, and it just helps move the story along outside of Gyro and Johnny, as this guy gives us the information we need and sets things in motion to make the story progress outside of the main cast, outside the main characters that are doing something to progress the plot, which is something that most JoJo villains don't really do until like the second half of the series. We don't even get full reveals of who these characters are until like the midway point or the very end. That's primarily true when it comes to parts 3 and onward, and part 6 is a relatively good close second in terms of revealing the main baddie later down the road. But either way, it's nice to get the main villain introduced to us, full character design and everything right off the bat, but still leaving their ability a secret. We have no idea what they can do, but we know that they want these parts, and they're willing to do whatever it takes for it, even putting in a ton of money in a cross-continental race as a ploy to find these different parts. And I'm very curious to see what happens to him, because he does seem like a very interesting antagonist leading up to the end game of part 7, so I'm just curious to see what happens next, and I can't wait to see what his stand ability actually is. Either way, I'm glad that he has a constant presence throughout the part, as we see how he reacts to certain aspects, and what else is going on. Again, as I stated at the beginning of the video, Steel Ball Run's first part got split up into 2, and part 2 is going to be covering all the stand battles and the progression of the story and whatnot and all that other good stuff. So I hope to see you guys there again. I'm really happy with how this is turning out, and I'm going to be fixing things up and trying to tighten everything a bit more together with parts 3 and onward, because I do want to do something similar with part 8. But again, part 2 is already fully being worked on and it's recorded, so look forward to that. But again, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. It really does help. Shows that you guys enjoy the JoJo content. It helps with the YouTube algorithm. It helps recommend stuff to more people on the site. Well, that's gonna be it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time for part 2.